Welcome to Warp Curry. My name is Gayer Patel.
And my name is Yogi Patel. And today we have a very special guest on this show, as we do every time, um, Mayank Amin. Many of you might know him. We've probably seen him in the media, in articles, online, social media, whatever the case is. But here he is. Welcome to the show, Mayank.
Thank you
How are
guys
you
for
doing,
having
man?
me.
You're
Fantastic. Just put the kids to sleep and now ready to, and excited to talk to you guys.
yeah. It took a while to get us all together to do this, and we're here at 9:45 at night, trying to make this happen. But obviously, you put your kids to sleep, so you have daddy duties, and it's very important. So we're glad to have you here. There's a lot to talk about because I know you, when we first talked, like even last week when we met in Philly, one of your questions was, what are we going to talk about? So I've got 7 pictures from your Instagram that we're going to talk about. I saw this on Hot Ones, if you've ever seen on YouTube. It's a show where they bring on celebrities to eat like different spice levels of wings, and the guy in there in between will find 2 3 images of the celebrity and say, explain yourself with whatever it is. So we're going to kind of do the same thing today, which is I'm going to bring up an image right now and talk about it. Yogi's got some questions, and then we'll go through each one.
All right.
I'm ready for it.
What is this? How do you land this? And I'm talking about M. Night.
How do you land your
All right,
wife?
so
That's the other question too.
I can't even see when that's from, but it's probably from many, many years ago. Maybe like 10 years ago or so. It was my last year of pharmacy school, and just like any other pharmacy student, we have rotations. And I was on my last rotation of pharmacy school, and a casting director had called my cell phone. I thought it was a prank call. Thought it was a friend that probably set me up for something, thinking that someone from Hollywood's calling, and it was actually a real call. It was a casting director for M. Night Shyamalan's movie that was coming to Philadelphia or being shot in the city. So I picked up the call at my rotation, and then they had an opportunity basically to come in to meet him, and they were casting for a role, a double for Dev Patel, the guy who was also famous from the Slumdog Millionaire. And lo and behold, I went there to the actual casting location, took some photos, measurements, things like that, and I got another phone call about a week later saying that I got an opportunity to be a stand-in double for Dev Patel in this movie. And I was supposed to start my job at Walgreens right after pharmacy school, but obviously if you get a call such as this one, you're going to hold off on everything. Just not even if you plan on pursuing Hollywood in life, but just to explore and experience what this is all about. And that's kind of how that picture came about, is that over time, I guess I became the pharmacist on set. And a lot of people that were there, many actually had studied acting and had gone to Hollywood, had gone to a lot of different training aspects. So when they saw somebody just walk in right off of pharmacy school, people were shocked.
What was it like initially? So did you prep in any way, or did you just show up first of all to your first, you got that second call and like, hey, you're in? I guess that's what they said.
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that I didn't know, like how much we get paid. I actually didn't even care. Honestly, certain opportunities that come up in your life where if it's like a once in a lifetime experience, you're not going to care how much it pays. You don't know the hours, and that was something throughout the few months that the movie was shot. You had a call time that you had to get there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and whichever location it was being shot at. But they told you don't have any plans for the evening because you could leave at 7 o'clock or you can leave at 10 o'clock at night. Whenever M. Night calls it cut for the day, you're there till that moment. So it was definitely a cool and unique experience. Definitely something that I think anybody would probably want to do if they got a call such as that. And there was actually no training required for me to pursue this opportunity because as a stand-in double, a lot of people often think that you're probably doing things that the actual main actor is doing, which is correct. But you could be doing things where you're running away from the screen, and they don't actually need to have the main actor doing that specific role. Because if it's a 2 second scene and someone's running away from the camera and all you see is the person's back, well, guess what? That's you don't have to actually have take up his time to do that. You could use someone like me.
So in the you saw the movie after, and were you able to recognize that this part was me? Were you
Yes,
able to tell?
there was a couple of parts where I could tell, because apart from that role, I was also a Fire Nation soldier. So a couple of scenes I could particularly tell, and actually anyone that's specifically focused in could notice that that's me.
Oh, nice.
But for most of the scenes that we got to work on, it was side shots. Um, but the way they had kind of done our hair and makeup, adding sideburns on, or even like meshing our hair to look exactly the same, it was kind of cool.
What
So
was it exactly what you expected? Like what we see in the movies or what we see in shows or behind the scenes, is it kind of the same chaos and everything that they highlight?
Yeah, so being on a movie set teaches you a lot of patience. We see, well, actually, Indian movies are usually like 3 hours and longer, but a lot of these American films are hour, hour and a half. Just shooting a 10-second scene on a movie could take 3 hours to set up, and it could take 15 cuts before the actual director says he finds a specific cut that he likes. So there's a lot of patience on the set, and when this set is getting switched around, you're just sitting there waiting and hanging out with people. Um, so that's one of the things that we've also realized is that anything beautiful takes a lot of time, and while the viewer has no idea how much time it takes to make a
yeah,
set, um, from actually being in the film and seeing the things behind the scenes, you actually realize and appreciate how much goes into making these movies. And then you understand why they charge what they charge, and why the actors and actresses also get paid a lot of money is because they have a lot of time that they're just sitting there, and the hours are not short by any means. So even if it's a celebrity who has the main role, they still have to spend a countless amount of hours throughout the day just sitting there, from scene to scene. So it's one of those things where I would definitely want to do it again, but I don't think I would have the time again to do it in my life.
yeah. We're gonna get into how busy you are in a few minutes, but you and I've been talking for a while now, about 2 3 weeks, to try to get you scheduled. I know you had an important event over the weekend, but as I knew we were eventually going to interview you, I mentioned it to a few people. And can I tell you, like, in the last few days, the women have been bugging me to as to when we're going to do this interview with you. And I was like, why are they all going crazy? You mentioned the sideburns, and that's why I want to bring up this image. And now I realize why the women have been going crazy for this interview. I also like the fact that you really know M. Night Shyamalan that well. I mean, he that's the third picture you have with him. So I'm assuming you keep in touch with him at all?
Well, once, I mean, that was 10 years ago. Um, After the movie finished, I got invited to a couple of his Halloween parties. But as with any relationship, you have to kind of keep connected with them because while we're busy, they're 1,000 times more busy than we are. He's still making movies out there right now. Same thing with Dev Patel. I just haven't been involved as much with the film industry after I finished. Um, but it was a great opportunity to meet him, and I'm sure if I wanted to reconnect, I likely could reconnect with him. But I know
Well,
that he probably has hundreds or thousands of actors and actresses that he works with over time.
so this was something that when I first met you, I knew about this, and this is kind of what I always remembered. And then there's a lot of stuff you've done, which is very impressive, which we're going to go into that. Now, this was kind of the lighter stuff of just what you did in the beginning, but you've done a lot more important stuff since then. And we'll get into it, but this article uh, really caught me, which is, obviously the fact that you can jump that high, but my goal isn't to be ordinary. And I feel like, the stuff we just talked about is that, but then even what you do after this article, um, there was a moment, and I wish, I don't know why, and this is probably the question I have, which is why you stopped doing this, or have you stopped? As far as I can see, because I know you enough, and and I know you've gone to more important things because of COVID, which we'll get into. Um, but I wanted to bring this up because as I was looking through it, in this little at the very bottom here, I typed this in. You started this, launched this on July 5th, 2014. So I would say almost exact 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
10 years ago. You're aging me, bro.
I was like,
I was
20
gonna
years,
say,
that's a long ass time. But then I realized 10 years ago. 10 years ago.
So a
But
lot
I
of
feel like
things like
you were very passionate about this, I remember.
yeah. So this company, it was never like planned or intended. Like I didn't have it on my to-do list in life of that I want to open up a wedding planning company. Um, but as with anything in life, if it comes along the way, if I'm trying to start a company, I want to make sure I'm putting my heart and soul into it, and it's not just going to be a mediocre company that comes out of it. And that's one of the tough things about being a business owner is you can open up and just spend a few hours a day on it, or you can really open up and spend a ton of time on it, because at the end of the day, it's your signature that is a part of your company. And for me, my signature was with every single event, every single wedding that I planned. Um, Everyone knew that this was an event that Mayank had planned. Um, I was in uh, a pharmacist role at Walgreens, and then I started working at Pfizer in New York City, and that itself was kind of a leap because I was working at Walgreens for about 6 years, and then I wanted to pursue something different, something in pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of pharmacists are trying to do that because the retail setting is kind of hectic. While you have to work 8 to 10 hour days, it can be very stressful. And oftentimes, why you see retail pharmacists really stressed out is because they have a lot of work, a lot of patients coming in, and not enough time. So I thought I was going to do the route of working pharma, and I applied to every single job that I found on LinkedIn. Like every single job, I mean, I typed in the word pharmacist, and I just did LinkedIn apply to every single position that possibly I could apply for. And I got rejected or denied by pretty much all of them. I wanted to be an MSL, which is like you become a salesperson, but you're kind of selling education to doctors. I would get rejected by every single company out there, but an opportunity landed in Pfizer in New York City. I took it. There was a friend of mine living in New York City, so I moved in with him, slept in the living room pretty much for the year, and worked at Pfizer. The great thing about working for a company like Pfizer is that they pay for things like your MBA. And while I was working for Pfizer, I started my MBA at Villanova. And there was a class called Opportunity Recognition. We had to come up with a startup idea. Um, and I didn't want to do something in pharmacy because that didn't seem fun, honestly. And I loved planning events. Back in college, it wasn't like weddings, but it was parties, club parties, a lot of other kind of events that I did at school. So I was like, let me try to mesh those. And a friend was getting married in Philadelphia. So I said, let me do his wedding as a pilot that I could present to my classmates. And I did that as a test wedding, told my classmates about it. But during his wedding that I was planning, a lot of the bridesmaids and groomsmen actually said that they wanted me to be their wedding coordinator for their weddings coming up.
Yeah.
And I was like, this was just a school project. But then I realized that there was a lot of people asking me to continue that project. And that's where I was like, all right, let me just start a company. And I started that and planned about 100 weddings
Wow.
over 5 years. So Platinum Dream Events went on for 5 years. And I did 100 weddings, and people loved it. Even till this day, I still get calls and emails
I'm sure.
from families asking me to plan their family members' weddings. One day I might go back and do it, but it's a lot of time and energy behind it that you have to spend, especially
It,
on your weekends.
it almost sounds a lot like what you said with retail pharmacy. It seems like it's really tolling um, because of the hours that you have to work in the situation. You lose your weekends effectively. You know, if you have one event after another every weekend, you're slammed.
Yes. And also now with kids, that becomes challenging because you're like, am I going to go do someone's wedding and miss the entire day that I could take my kids out? Um, or am I going to go plan the wedding? So um, the challenging thing was that at that time, it was fantastic. And I would do it if I had some leaders that'd be willing to lead the team. But the hardest part about owning a company is to find leaders that will continue to be with you.
It's hard.
and also continue to stay with you, because everyone wants to work, but then at some point you're like, I can just start my own company. And that pretty much happens in the wedding business all the time, because there's minimal to no cost to start your own company. You buy some walkie talkies,
Yeah.
dress good, and you make phone calls, and that's it. And you're in. So there was minimal to no barriers of entry for anyone that wants to start. But I always am happy whenever someone's on my team and then they do their own thing. I never take it as a thing where, oh, I can't believe they left me and started their own thing. I'm
Yeah.
actually happy because they've learned something from me, and that's why they're doing that.
What was that turning point for you 5 years ago? Yeah, as to like, all right, I think I'm done with this. I need to turn it down.
I probably actually would have never stopped, but when I was working at Walgreens part time, I walked into a Walgreens store to cover someone's shift, and I walked out. And when I was leaving, each pharmacy has like a reader board sign, a digital sign outside. And this reader board said, "Welcome, Skipback Pharmacy patients." And that was the name of a pharmacy in my town where I was born and raised. I actually had never stepped foot into that pharmacy. I always thought mom and pop or small little community pharmacies were for grandparents. There's the sign right there. So that's the sign that I saw. I took a picture of it because I was like, this is interesting. And I drove by that pharmacy the next day just to see what it was all about. And when I went there, I had seen a lot of seniors kind of like looking through the windows of the pharmacy, and they were distraught. And I've never really seen patients connected or loving a pharmacy that much. I worked for a lot of chain pharmacies before. And while people appreciate the pharmacist, no one's like, oh, I love Walgreens so much, I'm going to wear a Walgreens t-shirt and walk around. But I noticed it was quite different with this pharmacy. Like people were almost in tears standing outside, realizing that their pharmacy had shut down. And for me, that was like a turning point, because I was like, I might not know anything about community pharmacy in terms of being your own owner, but I do know that I want to help people out, and I can't see these people suffering. So I was like, let me look into seeing how I could potentially reopen this place that just got bought out by CVS.
So if CVS bought them, how do you go about opening the same thing? Like what were your next steps in doing that? Because a lot of people will see that and they'll be like, man, that sucks, but they're not going to want to put the time and effort or to go in to get into that. And over here, it's not like you saw a business for sale. You had to do something on your own if CVS took them over.
Yeah, so what happens in an acquisition, and this happens throughout the country day to day, is a chain pharmacy like CVS will send you an offer letter, and it'll say, let's talk. We're interested in buying your pharmacy. And if they offer you enough money, and if you want to get out, basically, you will take that offer, because it could be millions of dollars. And the last owner basically had sold to CVS down the street. And at that time, what happens is that they will pretty much come in and take all your files, like your patient profiles, because at the end of the day, they don't care about any of your business in your actual location. They just want the patient data. And this goes to show, like, patient data is worth millions and millions more than any specific location. Yeah. Patients aren't really tied to locations. They're tied to pharmacies or pharmacists. So this pharmacy closed down, and all those patients had their prescriptions transferred to the CVS up the street. And people weren't happy about that, because the people that really like small mom and pop settings, if all of a sudden they're going and being one of 50,000 customers, they're not happy with that. And that's what happened here. So I realized, like, yes, I had to start from ground zero again, because I didn't have any of those patients. When those computers got moved out, everything was moved. Literally, I walked into the empty building of whatever was there from before. Oh, wow. Without any data at all. So I had to start with 0 patients.
So you didn't actually, so it was a brand new business you started. You just got that location and started from scratch.
Correct. And it was about a time frame of about 8 to 10 months between when CVS closed that pharmacy down and when I reopened, because you have to apply for licenses, a lot of different things. So by then, people already reestablished a new home. So it's not like it closed down and then a week later I reopened and everyone walked back into the building. People are already set with a new pharmacy now, whether it was that CVS up the street or another pharmacy. And then the fear does arrive that if I go back to this local mom and pop pharmacy, are they going to close again? Are they going to put me through
Yeah.
trauma twice? So that was the thing that, I had to answer that for a lot of patients in our community.
Yeah, it's a big thing for elderly to move. It's hard for them to go from one pharmacy to another. So the next image, which is, the big story, and I'm assuming it's hopefully helped out part of your pharmacy uh, career. You know, and there's many of them. This is one that I really like that I saw, which is obviously a grown ass man wearing a Superman uniform, but for a very good cause. And the other thing that catches your eye is a little kindness can change everything, and that's literally what you're doing. Obviously, you're wearing masks, so COVID. It seemed like you were one of the busiest people I had seen, especially on social media. Um, Social media was one thing, but physically you were very busy with the vaccines and stuff. Talk about how tough that was, because I can't imagine it being easy.
Yeah, so the whole thing with COVID happening, when I opened this pharmacy, I told the community at our grand opening that, hey, I'm opening this pharmacy up for you guys. I was happy planning weddings in Cancun and all over the world and getting paid well to do that. I just reopened this place because I couldn't see you guys suffer. So the day that I need your help, please make sure you guys come back and help me out. And I didn't think, obviously, at that time, no one knew about COVID. It just happened that a year after pretty much I opened, that's when the first cases of COVID hit our county. And at that time, I didn't have a mission in my mind that I was going to vaccinate the entire community or do anything crazy or even wear a costume. But I knew that we had an opportunity, and I knew that with no matter what company that I opened up, I tried to change the person's experience behind it. So if someone walks into a normal pharmacy, you get your prescriptions, you might not feel happy by the time you leave. You just get your medications, you walk out. My goal is if somebody walks into my building, even if they have a terminal illness, I want them to leave with a smile on their face. And then when COVID hit, everyone was distraught. There was so much confusion and hardships throughout. At that time, I realized, like, let me try to create a different experience for these patients. And for me, it was by wearing a costume. Um, and there wasn't just Superman, there was all kinds of costumes. I pretty much went into my drawer, and whatever costume I had, I thought, instead of me wearing scrubs or a lab coat, that doesn't show any difference in terms of a time where there's complete chaos or a time of normalcy. So I ended up wearing a costume, and it happened to be the time that I wore it first was when I had to deliver medication to a little child. It was New Year's Eve, and I was actually headed to a party in Philadelphia. I happened to have a costume at the pharmacy. I don't know why I had a costume at the pharmacy, but I had one there. And I decided to dress up as Superman and drop off this medication to this child. Last delivery of the year, make it special for this little one.
Wow.
And when I went to his door, knocked on the door, kid came running to the door, and he actually thought Superman came to his house. And that picture and that story was shared pretty much all over Good Morning America and all kinds of places because it was so special what that child felt. And then I was like, if this child thinks that just from me wearing a costume, what if I wore that during a time of complete chaos during COVID? Maybe that'll alleviate some people's fears, or people that are not as happy. People are dying. There's all kinds of confusion happening. At least they'll have a sense of hope. And for me, that was wearing that costume. And I wore it one morning. It was Super Bowl Sunday. The Philadelphia Inquirer had come to my pharmacy the night before to find out if we're going to have a vaccine clinic the next day. It was a blizzard in Pennsylvania on Super Bowl 2021, and everything was closed. Nothing was expected to be open. So they asked me, like, do you really plan on having a clinic tomorrow with this snow? And I said, of course we are. Like, we got 1,000 doses, which was a miracle. And patients would come out no matter what kind of condition at that time. And that morning, volunteers showed up in my pharmacy. I wore a costume, walked out with the Superman costume and vaccines in my hand, and went to a firehouse down the street. I had no idea who was going to be in that firehouse to help me out. But that thing that I said at the grand opening, that one day when I ask for your help, I hope you guys come back. I had posted on our pharmacy's Facebook page saying, we're doing our first vaccine clinic. If anyone's available, just show up at the firehouse. And I walked into a room with the costume. from the time that I entered the door downstairs at the firehouse to the time I got in the room, there was just volunteers everywhere.
Wow.
And patients that were standing outside, the seniors, they were like cheering as I walked in dressed as Superman with a box in hand. And that was kind of the moment that our fire pretty much lit, where our community was relying on us, and I had the superheroes, all of our community volunteers there by my side. So I was like, as long as I can keep getting vaccines, we'll do as many vaccines as possible. There's nothing stopping us at this point. And then the costume continued, and what I call my superheroes, all of our community volunteers kept joining, and we got to a point where we had 2,500 volunteers.
How many?
Wow.
How many vaccines do you think you gave out?
We gave out over 100,000 vaccines.
Oh wow!
The crazy thing is, we only had 3 employees. So a pharmacy that with 3 employees
That's crazy.
and thousands of volunteers was able to give out a ton of vaccines. And at that point, for me, it wasn't that I had to go out and actually vaccinate. I just had to be a source of like motivation, encouragement for other people to keep joining. Because as long as I had people by my side, from there, and in one day, the maximum we did was 6,000 vaccines, and that was insane.
That's a lot.
Like in 10 hours, we did 6,000 shots in a day.
So, from everything you said, and obviously that speech you gave, you were able to motivate a lot of people. And I think even your social media motivates. Like I see it, and I'm motivated to do something. But what or who motivates you to do these types of things? From the, you know, the platinum dream events, and then, opening the pharmacy, and then from that, donning the costume to then give out 100,000 plus vaccines, where you could have given less, ran your pharmacy, and still, probably done okay. What motivated
It
you
just
to do
seems
more?
like your focus wasn't financial throughout your career, right? So it's just, where do you get that motivation to do something? Because finance motivates a lot of people, right? But where do you get that X factor, that difference, to do things the way you're doing it?
Yeah. So you mentioned the financial aspect, and not once during those initial year or 2 years where COVID vaccines came out did I think about, oh wow, you can make X amount of money by giving these vaccines out to people. And actually, many people months and months later said, you've given out all these vaccines, but you haven't built a single dose. Like, is everything okay in your brain? Because they realized that translates to literally millions of dollars if I build all those vaccines. And at the time, I didn't even think about it. Like, for me, it was, how can I continue to give more vaccines to people, and how can I get more people involved? The money aspect, honestly, we see some of the richest people in the world that are on antidepressants. Some of them overdose. They might be happy on social media, but they might not be able to sleep at night. So I don't account wealth to happiness at all. And I have friends that don't have money, but they're super happy. A lot of this thing that I've learned over the years is pretty much from my guru, Pramukh Sai Maharaj. During his life, he always focused on helping other people. And not once, even though he had temples like Akshardham, which are worth millions and millions of dollars, not once did he claim any of that to be his own. And he was always focused on helping people and never discriminating who you help. That was another aspect, is that, yeah, so you have this power. I had these vaccines. I could decide, all right, I'm going to take care of XYZ people. But for me, it was like, I want to make sure no one gets left behind. We're going to go to the poorest of cities and vaccinate those people. I don't care if it's someone who's black, white, Indian, Chinese. We're going everywhere. And we went to an African American community that would not have gotten vaccines otherwise. One of the ladies from there, who's now a judge, she just came to our 5-year anniversary celebration this past week, and she hugged me, and someone was doing an interview, and she mentioned the fact that when everyone else forgot about us, Dr. Mack and his team did not forget about us. And that was our thing, is that we weren't going to leave anyone behind. There were scary moments. I would go into pretty ghetto areas late at night, and I'd literally have to like run to the person's door if it was a homebound patient, give them their shot, and then tell my wife, like, I'm going to run back, and if I don't run back in a couple minutes, then make sure you go get help. But when you do things for a good reason, and the reason is not yourself, there's always someone looking out for you. And for me, that was my guru. And I told Ryan and Kelly when I went on their show, the S on my costume, it doesn't represent Superman. Some people might think, all right, this guy's really cocky. He's wearing this costume. He must think he's the shit. No, absolutely not. Like I could care less that I was wearing that costume. I just had to wear it because that was like a light bulb, and it would attract more volunteers. It would attract people. There was a lot of things that attracted, but the S stands for servancy. Our Guru was always a servant, no matter what he did, no matter how many people he helped. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do is help by being a servant in my community. And it was fantastic and it was fun. Yeah, it was crazy, but I actually enjoyed it. And that's one of the things I always constantly try to tell youth is that find something that you love doing, not for money, but that you actually enjoy doing. Because if you enjoy doing it, you're not going to be tired from it and you'll be happy. And that's why 10:15 at night, I'm actually happy talking to you guys right now where, I could probably be watching Netflix shows or other things. But for me, it's an opportunity to connect with people. And we were able to do a lot of that during COVID.
And not only you though, like you could have that thought, you have that motivation from Pramukh Swami, your guru, but your family has to definitely be a part of it as well, right? It has to be something that's bought in by the whole family.
Yeah. So there you see my wife and kids. Obviously, like if you realize, and this happens with many households, if someone's working like 100 something hours a week, there's someone taking care of stuff at home. It just doesn't magically happen. And for me, obviously, it was my wife. She was pregnant at that time, and that was another crazy thing about our story is that there was a little Superman inside my wife. So while I was out vaccinating at these clinics, my wife was still the one taking care of our little one to be inside of her. And while I didn't have that much of a role, you could say, in helping in that process, I've also come to realize that when you have the right people around you, your wife, your parents, siblings, you really can make anything happen. And when you also have a reason, so bringing our little one into a world that was not absolute pandemic or chaos was another reason because you're helping other people in your community get vaccinated. And whether someone believes in the vaccine or not, for me, that was the only thing that we knew that could potentially work. So it was worth a shot. And going back in time, I might have missed the 9 months my wife was pregnant, and that's why I consider, Wonder Woman. Superman has a Wonder Woman. She was that Wonder Woman during that time, and even far afterwards. Sometimes you think that all right, maybe they gave birth and he went back and spent some time with his kid. Not really, because it was still in the middle of the pandemic, and Jace was born, and that's when I realized like when people who had given shots to knew that that my wife was having a child, some of those grandmothers started weaving blankets, and when they came back for their second or third shot, some of them came with a completed blanket that had his name on it.
Wow.
And some meaning like we must have like 15, 20 blankets like that, where these grandmothers were walking in and saying, "You saved us. This is for little Superman," and he just became known as that. Patients that didn't have money, that are struggling financially, when they can give you a gift, like one woman gave Jace 10 different types of Superman costumes when he was born. And I was just like, I can't take this. I know that she's struggling financially because she can't afford her regular day-to-day medications. And she gives you a massive box of gifts for your kid. You just realize that this community, like, what can't you do for them?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like our guru with us is that, sometimes there's people that make sacrifices. I definitely am not one of them, but there's a lot of other satsangis that make huge sacrifices and volunteer and things like that. And our guru does so much for them. I still think he's here for me as well. But it's one of those things where your patients do a lot for you. And for me, the volunteers did a lot for me. So when I threw this 5-year anniversary party, I didn't care what it cost because these guys have done so much for me and my family these past 5 years that I owe them a lot. I owe these community members a ton.
Wow. And you mentioned that you're excited talking about this, but when we came up with, I can't remember at this point where we came up with your name in, doing this interview. But as I started kind of going through and remembering what I knew about you, and I've known you probably on and off for about 10 years, but more in the last few years, obviously, because of Robbinsville. But the excitement was building up because I know there's a lot that you've done um, for your community. And you said there isn't a lot you've done for the temple, but I know the things you've done, and there's pictures to prove it, which I didn't put on there. But you've done a lot of volunteering in all aspects for your community, for the temple, you and it's always been a pleasure to talk to you. I usually stand far away from you just because you're about a foot and a half taller than me, so and much better looking than me, so I avoid personal contact with you. But meeting you every time, it's always fun when you're there. Especially last week. I mean, we were together for the 2 days. It was a fun 2 days.
And I've known Mayank for a long time. Probably, not hanging out or anything, but known of him. We've been around. We've done a lot of volunteering together for various events. And one thing I can tell our viewers is that what you see online isn't even half of what he does behind the scenes, right? He definitely juggles a lot of things. I know he volunteers a lot with his family. He's always there for him. So what you guys see, like, I don't know where you find time in the day, like, especially when you're doing like Platinum Dream events, you were still volunteering at the temple. You were still a part of different activities. So, Bangla team in college, all that stuff. Like it's just a lot of stuff that you were doing at the same time, and you were doing it all to perfection, So I just wanted our viewers to know that it's not just what you see. There's so much more behind the scenes that he doesn't even share.
But thank you. And I think we're good.